1, cheap fakes, the new path to censorship. 2, if The Rock, if Mark Cuban, if Jamie Dimon are legitimate candidates for the next presidency after Donald Trump, we might have another name to offer, Dr. Phil. Conversation with Outkick's Bobby Burack. And 3, wait until 8th, asking kids to wait until 8th grade to hop onto a smartphone, onto social media with Senator from Alabama, Katie Britt. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, and always on demand at Apple or on Spotify. If you're listening on terrestrial radio from coast to coast, just hit subscribe at Apple or Spotify and you can catch us on your commute or when you're walking on the treadmill. If you're watching the Will Cain Show, just subscribe on YouTube, where today we're coming to you from Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. This is before Major League Baseball's game that is a tribute to the Negro Leagues tonight on Fox, San Francisco Giants and the St. Louis Cardinals. Incredible field, the oldest stadium, professional stadium in baseball history, 1910. Seats 10,000. Intimate affair. It's going to be awesome. And there will be living Negro League players, 97, 98 years old, World War II veterans, a part of the festivities tonight. And with his death just a few days ago, this is also going to be a tribute to one of the Negro League players that played right here for the Birmingham Black Barons, Willie Mays. It's an awesome event. It's one of my favorites. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later with Outkick's Bobby Burack. You get at the same time, big-time sporting event, intimate affair. And it got me thinking, you know, I saw Buck Showalter, former Major League Baseball announcer, two-a-days and Young Establishment James. He was breaking down, you know, Outkick's Dan Dockich, friend of the program. He's often said he can analyze what their athleticism is and their potential by skinny calves, high butt, their eyes. Well, not they're going to be a big athlete. I wanted you to hear Buck Showalter. He's making the same argument on MLB Network. Listen to this.
One, how proud you are, but how nervous you are. Yeah. But I watch these kids. I'm looking at other things than a lot of people look at. I'm looking at, how high is their butt? How high is their butt? Yeah.
How high is their butt? Again.
Beard. You don't see a bunch of pancake rear guys playing. You don't. There's some exceptions to everything. I'm just telling you.
What just happened?
Okay. I'll tell you another one, too. If you look at a full beard, if I see a guy that's got a full beard, there's an X there. Because he's not getting any bigger. He's not getting any stronger. You better like what you see. He's fully grown.
One more. Hold on.
I like what you're saying.
I've got more. But I'm going to start. What color eyes do they have? They brown? They green? They blue? Well, take a look at the batting title guys over the last 40 years. What color eyes they had, Greg?
I don't know. I don't know what color eyes the batting title champions have over the last 40 years. But Buck Showalter, in league with Dan Dockich, eye color, high butt, calves, length of fingers. You can use phrenology, physiology to figure out someone's athletic potential. I think you can also apply that to the presidency, at least in the television age, on height, full head of hair. But tonight, we're analyzing that when it comes to baseball. And this is a perfect place to analyze history and baseball and be a part of it. Rickwood Field, Birmingham, Alabama, a tribute to the Negro Leagues. It's going to be an awesome event right here on Fox. But let's get to the show today with story number 1. Cheap fakes are now part of the national lexicon. From Karine Jean-Pierre to your mainstream media, they're running with the idea that Joe Biden is not slipping. He's not a 4 out of 10. He's a 10 out of 10. He's sharp as a tack. It's just that you're a victim of cheap fakes. Videos edited out of context. They keep telling us there's all these other videos, longer, in better context, behind closed doors, where Joe Biden, the smartest man in the room. What I would suggest to them at this point is share the videos. Maybe it's time that we see. But here's what I'm concerned about in bringing this up again today. This type of language and this type of conversation, misinformation, disinformation, deep fake and cheap fake, are the red carpet laid out before we get to censorship. Here is the prediction. If Joe Biden remains the candidate as a Democrat for president, and Senator Mark Wayne Mullen gave a 50-50 proposition to us just the other day on the Will Cain Show. But if he remains as the candidate, This will be something that they use to censor. We saw censorship in 2020, Hunter Biden's laptop, among other issues. I think it's very easy to see that down the road, Facebook, YouTube, whoever, will start flagging videos of Joe Biden stumbling upstairs or downstairs, wandering off in a field, rambling during the middle of a sentence and say, that's a cheap fake, that's misinformation, setting us up once again for censorship. I don't think this is the curveball. We're waiting on the election curveball. But I think this is a brush back off the plate. I think this is the first entree into manipulation, propaganda, and censorship for the presidential election in 2024. We're going to get into that with Alabama Senator Katie Britt just a little bit later here on the Will Cain Show. But next, let's dive into Caitlin Clark. Let's dive into The Rock, Mark Cuban, Jamie Dimon, and a new name, Dr. Phil, when it comes to the celebrity president. That's coming up next with Outkick's Bobby Burack on the Will Cain Show. You know, if you look at any poll as we approach this 2024 presidential election, if you look at the list of concerns for Americans, number one is almost invariably inflation. And it's really no wonder why. I mean, in the last 18 months alone, the cost of groceries and basic necessities for a family of four has gone up $11,000 a year, as would be the case when you print money like a drunken sailor. As is in any basic economic understanding, supply and demand. You increase the supply of something, you reduce the value of something. And we've increased the supply of money to the extent that your dollar has lost 24% of its purchasing power. This is all backed upon the fact that we rack up government debt and print money. Government debt to the tune of $1 trillion every 100 days. So what can you do as this decreases the power of your own purchasing power, decreases your own family's ability to survive? Well, you can do what people have done really honestly for centuries, and that's invest in hard metals, invest in the longest store of value, invest in gold. And I've done that. And what better way to do that than the way that I've done that through our friends at Lear Capital. Lear Capital will help you through the process. All you have to do is call them. It's 800-920-8388. Or go to learwill.com, LEARWILL.com. They'll help you convert your 401k or your IRA. They'll help you step into the longest store of value in human history, gold. Is celebrity the most important ingredient, not when it comes to the job of the presidency, but to getting the job as president? It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, and always on demand, wherever you get your audio entertainment. Streaming live on terrestrial radio from coast to coast, but always available for subscription at Spotify or on Apple. If you prefer to watch the Will Cain Show, which comes to you live today from Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama, before the San Francisco Giants and the St. Louis Cardinals take the field tonight on Fox, and you can subscribe to us on YouTube. Come hang out. Join the Will Cain Show. As is my next guest. He's a columnist at Outkick. He's a friend of the Will Cain Show. It is Bobby Burack. What's up, Bobby?
What's up, Will? How are you? On the road again, I see.
On the road. You know, it's really, and I know you're a big sports fan, Bobby. Yeah. It really is incredible to be at this stage of my career, at this stage of my life. When I get assigned a job to travel, it's a little bit of a downbeat, a little bit of a hurdle. But once you arrive at some of these locations, I would say going to the Field of Dreams in Iowa, this Rickwood Field, you know, the oldest professional ballpark in baseball history, 1910. It does quickly skyrocket, Bobby, up sort of my sports bucket list. And I've figured out what I like, Bobby, and I'd be curious what you like.
Yeah.
I like intimate. I like small. When my family and I travel to Europe, I don't care about Paris. I want to go to Normandy. When we travel to Spain, I don't care about Barcelona. I want to go out into the villages and the small towns in the countryside. I think at this point, when I go to a sporting event, I want intimate. I want small. And to have like Major League Baseball in an intimate and small environment gets close to the top of the sports bucket list.
Yeah, I'm still with you. When I travel, a lot of times, I'm always looking at not just the city where I'm staying, but some smaller towns where there's more of a community feel and some history behind it. I do think what baseball does every year with this Field of Dreams is so fascinating. I know I was on the show with you the day after the Super Bowl, and you were at the Super Bowl when the Chiefs beat the 49ers, and you mentioned that Field of Dreams is one of the top 5 sporting events you've been to. And I didn't expect you to say that. I thought it would be the finals, the Super Bowl. So to hear that makes it one of the events that's on my bucket list. Now, I've never been there, but I certainly want to come one of these years.
Well, it made me think about other sports really quickly, Bobby. I want to lead into this that should do something like this. Baseball's embraced history and tradition. And if we're being real, like, sports is about history. It's about our past. It's obviously about our childhood, our relationship with our fathers. It's about nostalgia, hanging out and debating with our friends. But it's also about stats and comparing players from different eras. And I just think sports, and I love history. And I think, for me, sports is inextricable from history and tradition. And so for Major League Baseball to lean into history and tradition, I just think is so smart. And I think other sports should do that. I think that the NBA should put a game on at Rucker Park in Harlem. I think that NASCAR should run the Daytona 500 if they could ever do this with the EPA and with modern day safety requirements back on the beach. I think the NFL should travel to, Friday Night Lights, literally Odessa, Texas, home of the Permian Panthers, and put a game on in that high school football stadium. I think they should all take a lesson and do something like this.
Yeah, no argument from me. I love what you said about sports being mostly about history. That's so true because a lot of us become sports fans at a pretty young age. A lot of times our dads are watching a football game. We want to hang out with them, or we play catch and we become interested in baseball. And there's no sport where the history is richer than baseball. So I think doing this is very nostalgic. It encourages people, particularly young fans, to watch this cool event and go read about the history of baseball and why this event matters. And you could go further that I think I think all sports should embrace their past history. I think I love what you said about football doing Friday Night Lights in Texas. I think that would be such a cool event for the community of football. So yeah, I'm with you totally.
All right, well, Bobby, yesterday here on the Will Cain Show, the host of the very successful PBD podcast, Patrick Bet-David, the CEO of Valuetainment, he had an interesting answer, an answer that I didn't expect when I asked him, hey, what comes after Donald Trump? Truthfully, Bobby, I was asking him thinking, what comes after Donald Trump for America? I just think too many people, probably some supporters, but no doubt some haters, have allowed that to sort of become their personality. Like, who are you? Oh, I hate Donald Trump. And I don't know what happens when you rip the center of someone's identity away, when you rip that out of a society. Patrick Bet-David took the answer to that question and thought I was asking, I think, something about what's the next form of leadership. Still gave a fascinating answer because he gave me 3 names: Jamie Dimon, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Mark Cuban. And he talked about the power of celebrity. My co-host on Fox and Friends Weekend, Pete Hegseth, has said this to me. And we talked about, the path to the presidency. He's like, to be honest, Will, this is Pete saying, I don't know that the path to the presidency is from Congress or even from the Senate or even so much from the governor's office. It might be through Fox News. The point is, people need to know who you are, some sense of relevance, some sense of name identity. And I just wonder what you think about it. I know you wrote about it on Outkick. Patrick Bet-David saying Donald Trump has sort of broken the mold. And now, this isn't an endorsement. It's sort of a for better or worse situation. And it doesn't mean you'll be a good president, but in order to get the opportunity to be president, you might just need to already be a celebrity.
Yeah, I was fascinated by his answer mentioning Mark Cuban, Jamie Dimon, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So I think to answer this question, Will, we have to go back now 8 years. One of the most consequential questions in the last century, maybe in the history of American politics, is how did Donald Trump become president? How did this vulgar outsider ascend to the White House, the most powerful position in the world? The answers are probably endless. I can name so many. I think Obama presidency led to it. But overall, I think the crux of Donald Trump's rise in politics is that the American people came to grips with they trust establishment Washington so little that they'd rather put their trust in a political novice. And that anti-establishment movement, if you will, that's not going away. So I'm with Patrick Bet David saying it's not going to matter who has best policy. It's going to matter how famous you are, how well you can communicate. Now, the names he mentioned, I tend to think they would run as Democrats, and I think that could be problematic because that anti-establishment messaging doesn't work as well with Democrats because their voters probably feel the establishment's been working pretty well for what they want. So I would look more towards who can be the heir apparent to Donald Trump on the GOP ticket when it comes to non-politicians. And the name that keeps coming to mind is Dr. Phil. He's a great communicator, one of the most skilled communicators ever on television. He's uber rich. He has an audience. He's fair-minded, and he's very smart. If Dr. Phil launched a campaign in 2028, we couldn't just dismiss him, even if he were to go up against Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley. I'm curious your thoughts on that name, but to me, if I had to place a wager today, $10 on a long shot candidate for 28, I'm not so sure I wouldn't put that money on Dr. Phil.
Well, let me give you the pros and cons of Dr. Phil because I think they actually they affect another one of those names, a name given by Patrick Bet David, and that is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think he is the exception to your assumption. You assume that all three of those would probably run as Democrats. I'm not sure The Rock would run as a Democrat.
Really?
Patrick Bet David pointed out he spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2001 or 2000, and a lot of people forget that. Look, I don't ever want to speak out of turn or betray confidences, and I'm certainly making an assumption, but I've gotten to know Dwayne a little bit, and I don't know that we should say being a liberal is the same thing as being a Democrat, but I would be surprised that the values of liberals and by extension Democrats align with The Rock. But I do think The Rock suffers from something different. Well, I think that anybody that chooses to run for president has to decide whether or not they're okay being disliked. And I think that's a very hard thing. I saw that, Bobby, when I was at ESPN, meaning there's a lot of very famous people that had big platforms, and the positions they would take on a daily basis were guaranteed to be those positions that would keep them in the majority of being liked. And so I don't know, anybody running for president has to decide whether or not they're okay being disliked. They're preparing for the game tonight, the San Francisco Giants taking on the Cardinals here at Rickwood Field, and somebody's testing the PA system. I think he's literally calling outs. Balls and strikes over the PA system as I sit here about 10 yards off the field. So hopefully we can fight through that. But here's what I wanted to say about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his connection to Dr. Phil. Donald Trump is one of one. His celebrity, an extension of his business success. Dr. Phil and The Rock, instead, their celebrity is tied to their business success. So their success is in business because they're celebrities. And I kind of wonder, like, that gives Donald Trump, as Patrick Bet David pointed out, the trifecta. Business, politics, and media. And the only one of those that satisfies all three of those, for me, is Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban is the one that I thought, well, not that I support him, but he is a business success separate from his celebrity, Bobby.
Yeah, no, and I wrote that in the piece yesterday. I do think Cuban makes a lot of sense as a Democrat. He has positioned himself as a white face for DEI. I think that's would be his lead messaging. You see it all the time on social media. Anyone who dares to challenge DEI, Mark Cuban jumps in their mentions and talks about how powerful and important it is. But yeah, Cuban does check off that trifecta that Patrick Bet David laid out. And I would not be surprised at all to see him run. How well he'd fare, that's what I'm skeptical about. when you bring up old demons, I think particularly someone like Cuban probably has some. He's probably said things behind the scenes. And I just don't know how well that will sit with Democrat voters, or I think Republican voters can dismiss that more because they're just fed up with the entire idea of cancel culture and these terms like racist, sexist. But I'm sure somebody could dig that up on Mark Cuban. Anyone who's been in business as long as him probably has some skeletons in his closet. I don't know that he has, but I assume there's something when he's been in the news so long. I also think the Democrat field is going to be crowded already. I happen to think Gavin Newsom and the governor here, Gretchen Whitmer, will be pretty high candidates going into the race. You look at the 2028 betting odds, they're actually ranked 1 and 2 for the wind general election. So how Cuban would compete and fare against those two is, I would not give him the edge, but he does check off boxes. He has a lot of money. He's a very successful businessman, and the communication, that's key. Messaging often dictates voters, and I think Cuban could put forth a pretty solid message for that side of the ticket.
Well, I talked about a little bit earlier in the show. Dan Dockich, who I love, has always talked about the different physical traits that make up a professional athlete, like high calves, high butt, skinny calves at the base. I just played for the audience. Buck Showalter saying he pays attention to eye color, also a high butt. What I'm getting at is I don't know which of these guys satisfies the political physiology of being president, because there is one: height, full head of hair. These are since the age of the television president. There are certain requirements that Buck Showalter would want to check off for the presidency. But before we go, I also want to ask you about Caitlin Clark. Patrick Bet-David brought that up as well yesterday. You have written about this. You talked about the ratings. The WNBA trying to act like Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark's a big rivalry, and that's driving ratings. We know that there's one thing that's driving ratings: Caitlin Clark. Yeah. And Bobby, I just keep getting this question asked to me over and over, so I'm going to ask it to you. Why are they looking a gift horse in the mouth? Why this legitimate savior of a failing league in the WNBA has been met with such pettiness and jealousy and animosity?
Yeah, it's so frustrating, and I hate to bring it up because I have so many times, but it's so true. It's a combination of not only her being straight and white in this majority black league that proudly embraces lesbianism, but it's also the fact that she hasn't, quote unquote, apologized or acknowledged her so-called white privilege. I wrote about this last week. I'll go back to a statement that Bomani Jones made on ESPN in January, saying that, quote, "You can never be 100% sure a white person is not racist." What his argument is that you're supposed to look at white people as racist and privileged by default, but you can accept them once they acknowledge or apologize for it. Let's talk about Cameron Brink, who was drafted number 2 in the draft, also white, female, very attractive. The players love her. Angel Reese calls her bestie. Well, what did Cameron Brink do 2 weeks ago? She put a post on social media saying, "Yes, I acknowledge being a white female is a privileged position." Caitlin Clark has never done that. We just got done talking about Mark Cuban. The reason the left accepts him is because he's an advocate for DEI. He pretends to denounce white privilege. So what you have here is a white girl from Iowa not only emerging as the biggest star in a primarily black league, but she's also not a woke activist. I maintain that these media slanders and reporters trying to ask Caitlin Clark to condemn people using her name for racism and misogyny, they're trying to browbeat her into becoming, whatever you want to say, a woke activist, a guilty white person. That's what this is all about.
I think you're nailing it. I think you're right around the target there, right around the bullseye. And it's a shame. They'd rather choose grievance and pettiness and jealousy than their own personal wealth and benefit. You can see Bobby's written about that at Outkick.com. Check him out. He's a columnist again, Bobby Burack, and he's joined us today here on the Will Cain Show. Live from Rickwood Field, Appreciate you, Bobby. Thanks for being on the Will Cain Show.
Of course, Will, anytime.
All right, coming up, Alabama Senator Katie Britt, right here from Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama, next on the Will Cain Show.
Network. Listen to the all-new Bret Baier podcast featuring Common Ground, talking to lawmakers weekly from opposite sides of the political spectrum about the issues of the day and how Americans can find common ground in a politicized world.
That's just not happening on Capitol Hill. It takes leadership, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Along with all your Bret Baier favorites like the campaign, the candidates, the all-star panel, and much more. Available now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Saturday is baseball night in America on Fox.
What a catch!
The brightest stars.
There we go!
And the biggest games take center stage.
Oh, baby!
This week, Matt Olson leads the Braves against Aaron Judge and the Yankees.
Monster shot!
Or Christian Yelich and the Brewers take on Manny Machado and the Padres.
Wow!
It's baseball night in America, Saturday at 7 Eastern on Fox.
From the Fox News Podcast Network.
I'm Emily Campagno, and this is the Fox True Crime Podcast.
And I had nothing to do with her disappearance, but people still accuse me of it.
I sit down with the people who lived the nightmares.
I was in shock. I was just devastated.
The investigators who tirelessly worked on the case.
I feel for their families, and I really hope that they can catch this guy.
Bringing you closer to the story than you ever thought possible.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, welcome back to the Will Cain Show live from Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. So joining us now from the dugout, we're going to sit down with Alabama Senator Katie Britt. We're going to talk about social media in the hands of children. We're going to talk about the threat of the rise of cheap fakes. Here is Alabama Senator Katie Britt. Senator Katie Britt live here from Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. Senator, great to see you.
It's so nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
So, there's been this talk over the last couple of days. It's a bit of a surprise. It's a new term that I haven't become familiar with, but I think over the course of the next week, everyone in America will have learned the definition, or at least have heard the phrase, a cheap fake.
Okay.
A cheap fake that the media, that Republicans
Okay.
are taking Joe Biden out of context. They're cutting videos to suggest he can't move agilely, that he's not quite as sharp as you might believe, when the truth is he's a 10 out of 10 senator. And you are, and I am, guilty of cheap fakes.
Okay. I'm glad to, thank you so much for letting me know. First, welcome to Alabama.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you. Birmingham is so glad to host us. Alabama is so glad to host us. This is an exciting day, not just for our state, but for our country and for history. When it comes to that, goodness gracious, I think we've got to do a better job, because I think they have reset expectations, particularly for the debate that we're looking at 1 week from today, to say that a win is just he doesn't freeze or drool on the podium. That's not a win. I mean, this is our commander-in-chief. This is not only the most powerful man in the United States of America, but the most powerful man across the globe. He needs to act like it. He needs to have a command of the issues. He needs to be able to defend his agenda, which is what he will not be able to do a week from now. If you look at it, America knows that our borders are less secure, that we do not have stable prices, our streets are not secure, and families are not stronger under Joe Biden. And so we've got to recreate the narrative, and this fake that you're talking about. The real deal is that the bare minimum is not enough.
Yes.
We need the highest expectations from what we expect out of a commander-in-chief, and what they perform and how they command the issues and what they do for our nation. And so just not stammering, just not walking off the stage and not knowing where he's going, that is not going to be enough. That's not a win for me. I want to see somebody that I have confidence in moving this issue forward, and that's going to be President Trump.
I don't think it's too much to ask. I don't think crossing the minimum threshold, the lowest bar, is qualification for leader of the free world.
It's absolutely not. And how did we get here? And so no one's clipping these things. You can watch them consistently and see it happen over and over and over again. And look, this is why America doesn't trust the media anymore. because they realize the media is creating a narrative to protect Joe Biden instead of just calling balls and strikes. And hey, what a better place to talk about that than this right here. Just call balls and strikes. He's not where he needs to be when it comes to mental acuity, when it comes to being able, being able to not only command the podium, but command the issues. We look back at all of these different things that have occurred and people saying that he wasn't, mentally fit to stand trial.
Right.
In regards to how are you then mentally fit to sit in the situation room? You're not. And so we need to take a step back as a country and realize that we deserve better, and we're going to get better when we elect President Trump.
Well, I was being somewhat joking in my manner talking about this new concept of cheap fakes, but I'm actually really concerned because whenever this type of technique has been employed, words like misinformation, disinformation, it's come on the shortly after that, on the heels of those types of terms, you see and hear about censorship. I mean, I don't think it's a far reach to think that in the next couple of months as we approach an election, there'll be a push by social media companies to say, no, you can't post that video of Joe Biden. It's a cheap fake, whatever that is now.
And let's look back to the last election, what social media companies did, suppressing the information about Hunter Biden's laptop, which we now know to be 100% accurate. And they engaged in what obviously could shift an election. So I think you're really smart to bring this up right now. That's something that we didn't do a good job of in the last election. Let's talk about these challenges beforehand. Let's make sure that people understand that this kind of thing may be coming, and it's just totally unacceptable. And if social media companies cared about our country, what they would be doing is what you and I were just talking about right before this, and that is protecting our kids. They have the data. They know that their algorithms, they know that what the platforms they have created are creating chaos in our children's lives. And instead of really stepping up and doing something about that, once again, we're going to see them probably engage in something like this. And that's a sad day for the country.
So, Senator, you were just telling me you're the only Republican senator, female senator with school-aged children in the Senate. Yep. Gives you a unique perspective.
It absolutely does. I often say, we'll be talking about something. I said, I don't have to go ask anybody what social media is doing to our kids. I don't have to ask somebody even, what are groceries costing or what does it cost to fill up gas to run carpool your car. I'm actually living it. And it's not just me. It's when I walk with my friends in the morning and listening to their stories. It was, last night I grabbed a bite to eat with other friends and just listening to that. So we have two things going on. You have these smartphones with front-facing cameras. I think we have to do a better job as parents about talking about the potential harms of that. There's a lot of stuff that you and I didn't grow up with social media or those types of things. And I think we have to have adult conversations when our children have an adult device. And then you look at social media and, 1 in 3 high school young women said she actually considered death by suicide. And 9% of our high school population, CDC data says, actually attempted death by suicide. So let's say that again, 9% of our high school children in this nation actually attempted death by suicide. And when they get on these social media platforms, there's an opportunity, obviously, for bullying. There's an opportunity for them to make a mistake, post something, write something, like something, engage in something that if, they had a little bit of time or an adult, a parent talking with them, they may not have. And then there's manipulation as well. We've seen the manipulation that occurred on TikTok with Osama bin Laden's letter to America and the youth across this country. And we've got to wake up before it's too late. And this is an emergency and a crisis. We got to talk about it.
Well, and here's the thing. It's a real issue for anyone like you or me that has kids this age. And I know many people that watch my show or listen to my show are in some are younger, some are older, a lot are in our age group. And I know this is what, couples talk about at the dinner table. Like, when can I let them on? Because it's hard. I told you, I have a soon-to-be 8th grader. He doesn't have a phone. And it's not...
proud of you right now. I'm so proud.
Well, it's difficult because he is left out. He certainly feels left out socially. So, by the way, what did you do? You've got a 14 and a 15-year-old.
I have a 14 and a 15-year-old. And so we did not give them devices. And then when I got on the campaign trail, and I was away from home, a good bed, and trying to make sure that all the things were taken care of. That's when we gave them devices. We have not given them access to social media at this point.
So they have a phone, a smartphone.
They have a smartphone.
But no apps that are social media?
They do not have any of the, the typical social media apps or accounts, so to speak. And so...
When are you going to allow them to do that?
My husband and I, this is a constant conversation. And to your point, my son will say, Mom, I'm being left out. Mom, people are making friends in other schools. Mom. And we've even found, too, that as they get older, and, my daughter plays varsity sports, that some of the communication that comes through about practices for team captains and others comes through social media.
Yeah.
And so when your kids don't have them, they rely on another kid to screenshot it and send it to them. It really does complicate things. So I'm hopeful that through having these conversations that, parents will be emboldened to kind of band together, do what you did and said, let's wait until 8. I am hopeful that our teachers would talk about the patterns to our kids. I am hopeful that our principals would do more to keep our kids off of social media apps in the classroom. What we have now is kids snapping photos of other kids inside the classroom. So really disrupting the learning environment, or beginning bullying, or or starting a text chain that is unkind. And then I hope our coaches too realize that the more that they use technology to communicate, the more dependent our children have to be on it. And this is going to have to be people from all walks of life in every phase of our child's day stepping up and saying, we need to take a step.
And but to your point, it requires so much because, you've given me credit, but I don't even want the credit because I feel like I don't even know if we did the right thing. I don't know.
I do think you did.
But
I do.
But to your point, it's going to take so many different places of pressure to make this happen because you can't be the only one.
No.
If every other kid in 7th grade is on it,
Yeah.
you can't make I think my kid is the only one in 7th grade without a phone. But
Hold school flip.
no one's going to do that, Senator. That's the truth. And the truth is, and I think I've seen it. Most people just do it. And they know the stats. They do know the stats you're talking about. They do know the risks, but I don't know. And I don't know if there's anything you can do. I know you and several other lawmakers, Senator Cruz, are looking at bills. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little skeptical on what can a bill do? What can a law do? I don't know what we can do to stop this inertia.
Okay, so you're right when it comes to we need parents to have the truths and the information. That's one thing since I stepped foot on the Senate floor, Tom Cotton and I have been talking about. How do we embolden parents with the knowledge and the tools to protect their kids? So we've got to continue to keep that first and just outside. A couple of the things that we have been talking about, I do think they'd be helpful. They'd be helpful guardrails. They still obviously are just that, guardrails. They're not a complete answer. So you've got Senator Brian Schatz and Chris Murphy and myself and Senator Cruz, some clearly opposite sides of the aisle.
Right.
Who came together not as Democrats or Republicans, it was for concerned parents. We are all raising teenagers right now. We are all seeing it right now. And we're saying, let's not be on social media until 13. Now, the Surgeon General just came out and said 16. I think that is excellent. I think we need,
and you can make them sign in or something?
Well, you do. Well, it says, social media companies say they do this anyway. And so we'll see how that works. But between 13 and 17, really not allowing algorithms to be used against our kids. So one thing that Senator Brian Schatz always says is the longer you stay, obviously on a post, the more money they make. And the more depressing the content, the longer you stay.
Right.
And so think about that for our kids. And then last is really Senator Cruz's portion of the bill that he did, or addition to the bill that he did. I believe Senator Fetterman and others that we all brought together that just said eyes on the board. If you are receiving federal funding and then you have an obligation as a school to keep kids off of social media while they're in school building. And
so not in school.
You do it through Wi-Fi. So that's a great one. But look, there's no perfect answer to your point. Senator Blumenthal, though, and Senator Marsha Blackburn, have a great bill. I'm a co-sponsor of it. It's Kent's Online Safety Act. And I think 60 co-sponsors, bipartisan co-sponsors. So the question to ask yourself and so just reminding everybody that you have to have 60 votes to get them something through the Senate. So these two have done a remarkable job. They have the threshold of votes they need as co-sponsors. That never happens in the U.S. Senate. And what that shows you is that we all know we need to do something.
Right.
And so Chuck Schumer should be putting our bill, he should be putting their bill on the floor and allowing us to have these conversations. Senator Amy Klobuchar and I have...
He's busy taking on Zinn.
Exactly. And so what does that tell you too? His priorities are out of whack because we have said, this is what America needs. Let's have these conversations. And the bills as they are may be different as they pass because that's what we're supposed to do. Debate, hear from our constituents, put these ideas forward. But Chuck Schumer won't even give us a shot. And
on something so bipartisan.
And listen, this is a crisis. It's an emergency in our nation. And our kids deserve better from every one of us. And we have to demand it of Chuck Schumer so that we have an opportunity to protect our kids.
Well, I appreciate you welcoming us down here to Alabama. I know you do the reverse commute that I do.
Yes.
I go to New York on the weekends. You get to come home on the weekends. I know. Trust me. All right, Senator Katie Britt, thank you so much. Enjoy the game tonight.
Thank you. I can't wait. And hey, again, welcome to Alabama. Thank you for being here.
There you go. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Alabama Senator Katie Britt. That's going to do it for us today here on The Will Cain Show. Subscribe, Apple, Spotify, on YouTube. Subscribe as well. And we will see you again next time.